Kate Nilafalcho, welcome to Irish Granny Helen. Um, Welcome to returning subscribers, new subscribers, those hugely fortunate people who accidentally stumbled on this. You should subscribe. And I hope you'll enjoy this story. This is a little bit about the life of a young man that ended tragically early. I was always drawn to him, and I don't know why, but since it's my channel, I cover people that I'm interested in. And I'm interested in Wallace Reid. Wallace Reid was considered a dashing young star. He was kind of the quintessential rugged young American doughboy type, the square jawed, came back from war and was kind of the quarterback boy next door. Really interesting young man. Kind of on the surface, his image, the opposite of the Great Gatsby. That hedonistic lifestyle that the Gatsby story represented. The lost generation of the early 20s. He was really looked up to as a model of American family life. He was very devoted to his wife and he had a child, but there were currents under the surface. So we're going to talk about this. So let's look at Wallace Reid. He was born April 15th in 1891 in St. Louis, Missouri. He came from a show business family. His mother was an anchor, an actress. His father was an actor and a playwright. They were both involved in stage production, of course. He started acting on the stage at a very young age, but then he was sent to Freehold Military School in New Jersey. He went on to Perkiomen Seminary. I hope I said that right, in Pennsylvania. They have a huge endowment. It's very fancy. It still exists. I looked it up. It is fancy. He was a big athlete. He was real tall, athletic kind of guy. He played the piano, the banjo, the drums, the violin. He was multi-talented. He spent time in Wyoming as a teenager and became an outdoorsman. He was on horseback, the whole time. He was drawn to the new film industry by his father, who wrote and directed and acted in very, very early movies. He made this transition from the stage to film. In 1910, his first film that he was in, a small part, was called The Phoenix, and it was filmed in Chicago at the Chicago studios. He then tried to get a job directing at Vitagraph, but they liked his look. They said, don't want you behind the camera. We want you in front of the camera. They gave him a major role because of his good looks and his powerful physique. And he very quickly became what was called a matinee idol. So matinees, they'd show these movies in the daytime, comes for the French word for morning. And, like lunchtime, they would show the movie. And women would go, women who were stuck at home. And these heartthrobs, they discovered that they put movies that had these handsome young men. They could bring in all the disaffected housewives. It worked. In 1913, he married Dorothy Davenport. He really liked working she was an actress too. He really liked working as a writer and a director. He liked to do camera work. He was into the whole process. And in a way, it kind of reminds me of Roscoe Arbuckle. Roscoe Arbuckle was one smart cookie. He knew how to take apart and put back together a camera. He knew about the technology of the process, which a lot of people didn't understand at all. I mean, electric lights, telephones. The stuff was all new, and they had no idea what this magic camera thing was all about. So Wallace Reid actually made 2 films with D.W. Griffith. I find this problematic. Now, I'm not going to go into why I find it problematic. Just suffice it to say that D.W. Griffith was a gigantic racist. And if you want to know more about it, I would recommend to go back and listen to my summary of the book, The Presidents and the People. And if you don't want to listen to the whole thing, there's a chapter on Woodrow Wilson. You'd want to listen to that chapter. Anyway, in 1915, Griffith made A Birth of a Nation. And in 1916, he made Intolerance. And Wallace Reid was in both of those. In 1921, he got arrested for breaking the prohibition rules. He got pulled over, and they found alcohol in the trunk of his car. And that was the first crack in his image. About an 11-year career so far on film. He made hundreds of short movies. This was the first little crack that maybe the perfect young man wasn't as perfect. He had alcohol in his car. He was the boy next door, heartthrob, quarterback type. He was in several films with his father early on. And so this is a quote from Picture Play Magazine. This is one of those movie magazines that was so popular. These things were still popular when I was a kid. You could buy these magazines that actually had morphed a little bit. Some of them still were dedicated to movies, but more of them were just dedicated to teenage idols. So like there was Tiger Beat and magazines like that. So this is a quotation about Wallace Reid. The only reason why they don't let Wally play in a dress suit roles all the time, dress suit, like in a nice outfit, is that the casualties among the ladies would soon empty the picture houses, toying with the fans' hearts. Even to print this picture, is what they said. And they had a picture of him in his nice suit and tie. And what they were implying was that he was so good looking, women would pass out if he came on screen dressed in a suit. And what was said about him was women wanted him, men wanted to be him. He evolved from working as an actor in his dad's films into acting and directing for a guy called Alan Dwar. And this was a guy, Dwar, this was a guy that I looked up because I had never heard of him before. He operated Flying A Studios in La Mesa, which is outside San Diego. I had heard of Flying A Studios. When movies first started being made, there weren't all these big studios in LA. Hollywood was not a thing. It started out on the East Coast. And they moved partially for the weather, because there were more sunny days in California, and the stage sets were all outside. And so it made it very difficult because they needed light. Technology wasn't that great, and it made it very difficult to be outside in the wind or the snow or the rain. In the East Coast, they were severely limited to how many days they could film. So California was nice all the time. So they would go out there and they'd have all these sets lined up, kind of like a box with dividers in it, a shoebox divided like this, and then just one whole long end missing. And in each little cubicle, they'd be filming a completely different movie, but they were silent, so it didn't matter. So he worked with this guy, Alan Dwan, and Dwan was one of the very first studios, Flying A Studios. He was responsible for getting Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks together. He filmed Carol Lombard, and Gloria Swanson, Shirley Temple. It was very famous. Flying A Studios was only from 1911 to 1912, so it's one of the very earliest ones. In the meantime, in 1913, Reid married Dorothy, and he worked in D.W. Griffith's movies, Birth of a Nation and Intolerance, but he was a very devoted husband and father, despite this, big old heartthrob Romeo kind of image. He was a big star as far as like being in movies with leading ladies, like the top young women were paired with him in movies. He made more than 100 shorts, and he finally got signed by Lasky's Famous Players. This was one of the earliest studios, which eventually became Paramount. He made 5 race car driver films, and he was like a daredevil between 1919 and 1921. He did his own stunts. He was very athletic. He was called the brawny boy next door. In 1922, his movie Across the Continent opened San Francisco's Castro Theater. It was the very first movie ever shown in the Castro. This was a movie palace, and I looked it up because I just love the name Movie Palace, and I wanted to see what it looked like in its original form. It was a Beaux-Arts, a Spanish Baroque mixture. That's fancy. And then in 1937, they added an Art Deco marquee out front. So he's making all these racing films, and he's doing all his own stunts, which really, kind of scary for the studios if you think about it, because he's their cash cow. He actually tried to qualify for the Indy 500, the real Indy 500, and he didn't make it. He had to drop out before the final whatever. So he had this paradigm shifting moment in his life that is really sad, and having read several different places about it, I'm not sure what the real story is. It doesn't seem like anybody is entirely sure about the real story. So I will tell you the conventional version, and then I'll tell you the stuff I heard in the background. Excuse me. So in 1919, the story goes, he was on his way to finish filming The Valley of the Giants. Outside Arcata, California, he was injured in a train wreck. He hit his head when the train jolted and opened up a huge laceration on his scalp, which bled heavily. And they had to sew him up, and apparently he probably had a concussion because he was in a lot of pain. I also heard that he'd hurt his back. Now, I don't know. And the story goes that the studio, they were not willing, they were almost finished filming. This was like the last part of the movie. They had a deadline, and they had to travel to get to where they were going. So it was on location in Arcata, California, Northern California. And so they had the studio doctor come in. Now, the studio doctor was an employee of the studio, not a real believer in the Hippocratic Oath, I guess, because they started injecting him for pain with morphine. And they had to get him through to the end of the movie, and they had to do it quickly, and they couldn't stop for whatever his injury was. And in the process of forcing him to continue to do his own stunts, this became a permanent source of pain, but also he became addicted. And they were giving him morphine, and basically this is a heroin addiction. The studio didn't let him heal because it was making more and more movies after this one. He had to keep going. And they drove him physically. It was very demanding. And it got to the point where he started looking unwell. He started looking not so robust, not so much the brawny boy next door, able to participate in any sport, which he really had been. The public was told that he had what was called Klieg eyes, K-L-E-I-G. So the Klieg lights were these big bright lights that lit up the stage sets. And a lot of the actors had problems with the brightness. It irritated their eyes, photophobia. So they wrote his unwellness, his unwell appearance to this, and described him as being on the road to recovery, put him into a sanatorium to recover. Now, this is in January of 1923, and he had a couple of bouts of needing to be hospitalized before this. It's just not, different sources say slightly different things, so I'm just sort of giving it all out there. They had a PR program that went on. They could have really ruined his career by letting the news get out that he had a problem, and he would have been considered a junkie, and they didn't have tolerance for that sort of thing. One of the things that one source said was that this was just right after the end of World War I, and a lot of young men remember Vietnam, remember the Persian Gulf. A lot of young people came back injured, disfigured, handicapped, in pain, and or psychologically traumatized. And what did they turn to? They self-medicated. And that's exactly what happened at the end of World War I. Suddenly, cocaine, heroin, morphine. Morphine and heroin are related. Morphine is from the opium poppy, and heroin is a synthetic version, but when it's in your body can't tell the difference. And so there was a brisk business going on, especially in Hollywood, but in most large urban areas, there was quite a brisk business going on. And this included Europe. And, Cole Porter talks about, I get no kick from cocaine. It was a problem. And so he had been treated a couple of times, or at least hospitalized a couple of times. And they decided, let's not be stupid about this. Let's not present him as the poor, worn down junkie. Let's talk about him as the brave young man facing his physical challenges and on the road to recovery. So that's the picture that was painted. He wasn't doing well. In January of 1923, his wife got him put into another recovery sanitarium, and he died at the age of 31. He was there for a couple of days, and they said he died of the flu. But symptoms of withdrawal, that's all I'll say. So he was buried at Forest Lawn. Dorothy, his widow, was, devastated. They really were a close couple. They really did want just a close family. They had a son and they had a daughter they adopted. So his widow co-produced and starred in a movie in 1923, a documentary style, called Human Wreckage. And she even took this on a national tour and gave lectures on the dangers of drug addiction. They had two children, Wallace Reid Jr., who was born in 1917, and an adopted daughter who was adopted in 1922 when she was 3 years old. Reid was featured in a documentary that came out in 1980 called Hollywood, and I saw little bits of it on YouTube. You can look for it. I don't know if you can see the whole thing. I was just looking for stuff about him. And they interviewed people who had worked with him and who knew him personally. And it was really interesting. Then there's Karina Longworth's podcast, You Must Remember This. And in 2018, he was featured in one of the episodes. I don't know which one. So his son went into acting. He was a child star, and he made 10 movies in the late 30s and in the early 40s after being a child star. But he became an architect. He died in 1990 at the age of 72 when his home-built plane crashed into the Santa Monica Bay in the fog. Kind of did a John Denver. Davenport, his widow, went on to make a number of socially conscious films. She was a writer, a producer, a dialogue director. She died at the age of 82 and was buried at Forest Lawn next to her husband. And Deborah and I will be maybe having a chat with him if we're lucky. So stay tuned. I hope you found that interesting. I find this time period so fascinating. I hope I'm not driving everybody crazy dwelling on it. But look up Wallace Reid. He was very handsome and he had a presence. Even in these silent movies, he commanded attention on the stage. And just a nice looking young man. It's sad because he seems like he was a really decent young man. Okay, that's it. Thank you for watching. Slánka foil, sláncha.